Welcome everyone to Lean Startup Games, the ownership model canvas. There's a lot going on in that title. We'll break that down, but I want to introduce Greg Brodsky from Start.coop, and maybe you could introduce yourself and tell us a little more about Start.coop.
Yeah, hey everyone, nice to meet you all. Thanks for joining today, and thanks to Josh and the team for putting this on. I think this will be a really interactive workshop. So I'm the co-director of a group called Start.coop. We help to incubate co-ops, people who want to form cooperative loan companies. Right now, we're doing our yearly application process. So there's a lot of great co-op developers around the US. Happy to put some resources in the chat. Our vision in particular is about co-ops that can scale either regionally or nationally. And today we're going to share a tool later on called the Ownership Model Canvas. So happy to be here.
Excellent. Let me get this moving here. So awesome to have Greg here. When I pitched this idea to him, he was totally game for it. Pun totally intended. And so we thought we'd play some games together. And I love what Greg is doing. Greg and Maggie and I were connected through the Cooperative Development Institute Board of Directors. Awesome organization supporting cooperative development. Co-op is just, just to get this out there for folks who maybe, not something you're as familiar with. I mean, it's easy to say just that it's a business or organization that's run for the benefit of its members by its members democratically in some way, right? So that could be, its members could be the employees of a business, or it could be, the consumers of, say, a food co-op or something like that, or residents in a housing co-op or other things like that. But it's basically about, those two kind of things, that there's ownership, there's a share, and that there's a voice, there's a say, right? There's a way that you do that. So Greg's going to dig more into why that's awesome. And I love Start.coop because it connects, these two things that I love, which is one's kind of these lean startup accelerator, thinking about that scale and growth and big impact. And also the cooperative, triple bottom line, social benefit stuff as well. So this is also part of Rhode Island Startup Week. If you haven't checked out the other stuff that's being offered, go check out, if you just Google Rhode Island Startup Week, or if you go to ristartupweek.com, you see the whole list of events that are going on. RIHub is the convener of that. We've got tons of events. It's been going really well. Tons of awesome stuff. So check that out as well. It's great. This is the first startup week, and it's got a ton of energy. So excited for you guys to be part of that. Also, thank you to co-sponsors of this event. So I work with the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, help people start, grow businesses. We have free confidential business counseling and assistance. Social Enterprise Greenhouse, Austin couldn't be here today at the last minute, but he is a great partner, and they are a great partner focused on social enterprises specifically, also offering mentoring, accelerator, incubator supports for people who are growing social enterprises. So specifically, so a great organization. And then Local Return is another organization. I happen to be on the board. So they are focused here in Rhode Island on building the local community investment ecosystem and community wealth. So focusing, how can we get our money into local businesses, not just on Wall Street, but on Main Street. So we'll jump right in. Our agenda today is, I'm going to stop talking at you in a little while, and we're going to jump into playing a game together. And then we're going to use that game. The game is really about sort of an idea generation for businesses. You may come here with an idea for a business already that you're working on, but we want to get you thinking and creating together a little bit. So we're going to play that game. And then Greg's really going to dig into the why of co-ops and of the ownership model canvas, the tool that they've developed. And then we're going to use some of the ideas that you generate from the game, or other things that you're bringing to the table, to think through how to use that ownership model canvas tool to map out what your ownership structure is going to look like, how you can think about the stakeholders, social benefits, all that kind of stuff. So sound cool? Any questions, any concerns, any Anything else anyone wants to jump in and say? Okay, we'll jump right in. So this is a game that I like to play to sort of talk about the lean startup. I'm going to give a little bit of background and then we'll jump right in. So the lean startup approach, for those who aren't familiar, this is like a 20,000 foot view and very quick sort of view. It's really about, it's mostly focused on those businesses that are oriented towards scale, oriented towards, you know, becoming a larger business. But the tools, I think, can be used in Main Street businesses as well. So the first piece of it is, how do I find my customers, who they are, what they want, what they will or won't, why they will or won't want what I offer more than the alternatives. You know, co-ops are businesses too. They have to have a model that works, and they have to have a customer, right? Or stakeholders. So that customer discovery piece of it is a key piece of this lean startup approach. The other piece that we're really going to be talking about with this game a little more is business modeling. So what's the best, most efficient way of meeting customer desires and demands? How do I start from, you know, customer demands, pains, opportunities, and creating something valuable that somebody wants? What's the best way to create, deliver, and capture that value? We'll dig into that. And then how can I figure out what will work best and get data and feedback to guide my actions? This piece comes from software development, and it's called agile testing. And there's a bunch of tools around sort of how do I get it in front of a user and have them break it, rather than live in my fantasy world of the dream of my business and the dream of, you know, how do I build something relatively quickly, get it in front of a user and get to see how they react to it so I can figure out whether it's going to work. So that's the lean startup approach. And for the game, you'll need to know kind of what a business model is. And I'm going to give an example that's going to make this, I think, pretty clear. But a business model, and people use this, it's super jargony, right? And people use it in jargony ways. And they also use it in super like exclusive, like, you know, talking down to people ways sometimes. So I like to destroy all of the jargoniness about it, right? So a business model is the way that a business solves customer problems and creates, delivers, and captures value. So there's three pieces to that, right? Creates value, how it produces products, services, experiences, what it does to produce that. Delivers, how it distributes it, how it delivers it, how it gets it to the customers, right? And captures, how it makes money, right? What the revenue model is. So that's the three sort of components of a business model. And so when someone asks what your business model is, it's usually a shorthand for how you do those things. We'll talk about some examples that'll make it pretty real. You may have seen this tool. We're not going to dig into this tool. It's actually the ownership model canvas is kind of a riff on this tool, which is the business model canvas, which is used in that lean startup, used in a lot of accelerators. It's a good visual tool for mapping out those different pieces of your business model, how it creates, delivers, captures value. Who's the customer? What's the value you're creating? How are you reaching them? How are you making money? It's mapping out those things in a visual way, right? In a quick visual way. And the big picture of it is, how do I come up with something that's desirable, the customer wants it, feasible, I can actually do it, and viable, I can actually make money doing it, right? So let me stop there and see what kind of questions people have, because I just threw a ton of like, I just gave you a 101 to lean startup kind of stuff very quickly. Questions, confusions, frustrations. What you got? Making sense?
What was the last? It was feasible, valid, and what was the first word?
Desirable. Desirability, feasibility, viability. Desirability, does my customer want it? Do I have customers who really want this? Does it solve a problem? Does it, you know, is there a pain point? Is there an urgency? Is there a community of customers who want this? That's really what you're testing for in desirability, right? If it's not desirable, do not pass go, do not collect $200, do not go any further, right? If you don't have something that's worth a customer's time, don't even worry about building out the rest of it. Like, I need to know that it's worth it to a customer, right? And then feasibility is, okay, what do I have to do to actually deliver that value? So what activities do I have to undertake? What resources, what assets do I need to make it happen? What partners do I need to work with? How do I do that, right? So that's the feasibility piece of it. And can I do that, right? And then viability is my revenue streams, my cost structures. It's the financial piece. Can I do it? Can I deliver that value, create and deliver that value in a way that I can make money and make a profit? And then the ownership model canvas and the co-op question is, okay, so then who shares in that ownership and that profit, and thinking about that, because that often goes unspoken.
Josh, I just want to add to what you're saying. I think
Yeah,
the
please.
reason why this slide is so important is that, there's a lot of people have an idea for a business, and some of those ideas are good and some of those ideas are bad. And I think what's fascinating about the lean startup approach, which we try to use in our accelerator, is that, rather than keeping in your head, how do you actually go out and really validate, on the desirability side as fast as possible, to your point, and see, how many other people want this, and if people want it, are they willing to pay what it's going to cost me to actually create this business? And that's where the viability on the bottom comes together. So it's really just a way of like testing it as soon as possible, which can be terrifying to go out and get that feedback, but this is a great way of thinking about it.
It's a great point. I mean, it's really Steve Blank, who's one of the guys who kind of pioneered this approach, says there are no answers in the building. There are no answers to your questions in the building. You have to get out, talk to customers, engage customers. That's the point, is get out. You're living in fantasy world until you have some way that you've engaged in a real way and tried to understand, who your market is, who your customers are. That customer discovery process is so central. So yeah, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to jump into this other piece. Some of this is going to sound, it's a lot in a short amount of time. Actually, I think the game will help to reinforce the concepts and help you sort of make it real. So I'm going to talk about business model innovation, which is what the game is about. This like X for Y. So whatever happened to Blockbuster? That's a real question.
Netflix came around.
Yeah, Netflix came around. So Blockbuster, there is one more Blockbuster, right? There's literally, and ironically, the documentary about it is on Netflix. It's called The Last Blockbuster. I love it. So it's in Bend, Oregon, right? And they're still doing the thing. They got a whole throwback nostalgia vibe. That's their brand. But yeah, Netflix came around, right? Actually, so there's one other business that isn't as big, but certainly aided in the takedown.
Redbox. Are you thinking Redbox?
Yeah, I totally am. That's who I'm thinking of. So whatever happened to Blockbuster? How would you describe Blockbuster's business model? How did they deliver their value? Their value was what? DVDs, first it was, whatever the technology was when they first started,
Which, yeah, DVD, but it was experiential, right? It was the process. And that was, I think, their value is it was an outing. You went with your family or your kids or your date or whatever to pick a movie, and there was competition.
Yep.
So because there was only X number of the most desirable titles. So that was the experience.
Yep.
And then they had the extra gigas at the counter, which they probably made a lot of revenue on, the candy, and the popcorn and the whatnots, right? Yeah. And it was a membership model, if I remember.
That's right. Way. So there was a membership piece to it, although it wasn't the membership piece. I think I still have my Blockbuster card.
I think it gave you some kind of a discount after a
yeah, little,
yeah. But Netflix was a mail order to start.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So Blockbuster was everything you said. It had the experiential piece, but really, it was, you went to the stores, they were everywhere. It was a brick and mortar retail business, right? So that's how I would like the family outing to Blockbuster. It was a thing. It was a community, right? It was a real thing. So, but I'd say like the shorthand for their business model is a brick and mortar retail business, right? So Netflix came along and Redbox came along. And the key thing about this is that Netflix and Redbox didn't, their fundamental innovation was not on the technology at first, right? As Maggie said, Netflix was mail order first, right? And the mail order business models are as old as the mail, right? So that wasn't a new business model, but it was a new business model to that industry, right? And Redbox, I would call a kiosk model, right? So they had like the vending machines, they have the vending machines. And that wasn't a new model in terms of, but to this industry it was.
I want to add something to that, and this is more of like a public service announcement.
Sure.
If you ever had the Netflix mail-in order and then transition to the online, you might still be paying for that mailing order. I didn't realize that until about 2 years ago, that I was still paying until it actually went to my. So it was just a shock that I've been paying for like 4 years, and I didn't even use it. So if you
part
do,
of their revenue model is people who forget that they're paying for this. So yeah, thank you for the public service announcement. But the point of it is, right, like that these different business models came in and disrupted the industry, right? They took down a giant through different business models. So that's the idea of business model innovation, is that the brick and mortar model, what is it about the brick and mortar model that made it sort of more vulnerable? What are the costs of a brick and mortar model?
They have a lot of costs associated with real estate or leases, but the real issue is not that it's brick and mortar. The real issue is that Blockbuster didn't recognize the threat and change their model to accommodate and realize that they were going to have to deal with the fact that they're going to have an investment that's eventually going to disappear.
For sure.
and usually what other big companies like this does, when like when they recognize a threat, they go there and buy it. That's kind of what Facebook does, right? Every time a threat comes around, they just go there and buy it, and then they just get rid of it.
Yeah. It's interesting because that's
they're
a great
really
point,
buying
Jeff.
their customers, like is what they're buying. Yeah.
They buy their customers, they buy the brand, they buy, something might be the technology, but really it's probably, the way to get to market, right? They're buying, but Blockbuster, actually it's interesting that there's more nuance to it. The movie on Netflix, the documentary, gets into it a little bit more. Blockbuster tried to go into this space. They tried to do mail order. They didn't try and do kiosk, but they tried to do mail order. And actually some of the issue was financial, and it was the way that the parent company was sort of using them. But they tried, but it also is, to Jeff's point, they weren't agile enough. They weren't able to pivot, right? So they were so wrapped up in physical brick and mortar assets, which the parent company wanted because they used that for their financial benefit. They weren't able to pivot. So the faster you can pivot, a more agile business like Netflix could come in and disrupt, and Redbox as well with the kiosk. So that's the business model innovation concept. I've thrown like a fair amount at you in a pretty short amount of time, but I hope it sort of makes sense what I'm getting at. Any questions, thoughts, confusions about any of that so far? No worries if that's the case. We'll do a little fake it till you make it. We'll dive right into the game. And the game is called like X for Y. So the game is pretty simple, and we're going to play it together. So I hope you're ready to engage in playing the game together. So it's a game for generating business ideas. It's based off that same concept of what Netflix and Redbox did to Blockbuster, that kind of business model innovation disruption. So ground rules for the game, just like any sort of gameplay: no bad ideas. Get a good idea first. You have to have lots of ideas. So you're going to be generating ideas. We're not going to say, that won't ever work. That's not possible. Let's just dive in and throw out all the ideas that you have. We'll keep things moving pretty quickly and not dwell on any one particular idea or combination, just getting stuff sort of flying, and then fake it till you make it. So if you know that phrase, if you don't feel as comfortable, you'll get more comfortable as we play. So we're going to play a little bit together. We might break out into groups, but given the size, we might not. So what I'm going to suggest is that we do this together. So first, it's called like X for Y. And for the X, you think of some businesses with interesting business models, right? Whatever that might be. So that might be like Netflix as an interesting streaming subscription model, Uber, Airbnb, whatever other businesses that you think of that have sort of interesting business models that you think could be used in other contexts. So for instance, you might say, Uber, and you might say, well, I don't like Uber for various different reasons. You don't have to. And in fact, you can think about how you work that model and make it better from a cooperative perspective, perhaps. Greg might talk a little bit more about that. But Uber has an interesting business model, right? Their interesting business model is that they create value through what was called a quote unquote sharing economy, right? So people, the way they create value is really interesting because individuals bring their own assets and resources, their own cars, their own, Uber doesn't have to buy a fleet. They're a taxi company without owning any taxis, right? That's an innovative model. It's been an exploitative model, I would argue, but it's been incredibly effective. How could you flip it on its head? Could you use it in a way that benefits the members and users of it? There are some folks, I'm leading the witness here. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but you could still use Uber as your X, and you could say, I'm interested in the dog walking business. I think there's an opportunity for me in the dog walking space. So I'm going to say my X is Uber, and my X, my business that I think has an interesting business model, is Uber, and my Y is the dog walking business. So I'm going to be the Uber for dog walking businesses, like X for Y, like Uber for dog walking. Make sense? Follow that? Any questions, confusions? So let's do this a little bit together, and feel free to, unmute yourself and come up with, your ideas. What are some business models that you find interesting? They do something interesting in the way that they create value, in the way that they deliver value, or in the way that they make money.
Tinder.
Okay. How would you describe Tinder's business model?
It's like, well, it's a dating app, and it
Right.
like matches like features and likes and dislikes on one side with the other,
Nice.
and then makes an introduction.
So the platform, the way they create value, the way that they like create those collisions. Nice. Okay. Other business. So we've got Tinder. Anyone who you can cheat off of one another. This is a group game. It's not cheating. It's collaboration. So you can write down Tinder as one of your X's. We've got Uber. We've talked about some other ones. What else? What other businesses have interesting business models?
And Amazon.
Amazon. Now Amazon has like multiple business models going on. So which one are you? Which part of Amazon are you thinking of?
Well, I mean, their biggest one right now, right, is their retail, online retail. But you could argue that AWS is also a well-copied leader.
Yep. Amazon Web Services. They've got their affiliate sales sort of thing, right? That's another piece of their business model. They keep like they're an amoeba, right?
Yep.
Very cool. Okay, so Amazon.
I would stick with this. I would go with the retail for now. Just
with the retail side. So Amazon, the e-commerce side.
online, the online retail.
Nice.
Can I kick in here?
Yeah, please.
I don't know how, I'm trying to look at some folks here on how many people remember Napster.
Sure.
And if you think about it, the idea of being able to connect a bunch of people independently together is is essentially the Uber model. It's also the vacation homes by owner model and the Airbnb model.
Yep.
Somebody sits and sort of directs all that, but basically they're just a clearinghouse from somebody who has something to somebody who wants something. So
Yep.
it's the same technology. It's, you know, improved over the years, but that technology was available 20 years ago. And, you know, the brilliance of Napster was to, you know, use it for something as benign and revolutionary as sharing, you know, sharing music that you already had paid for, you know, never mind the copyright, but it's the same model. It's startling when you think about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Pete. That's awesome. Yeah. So Napster / Uber Airbnb. So that's like the value creation piece of that is innovative and interesting. It's the sharing economy. You know, Napster did it through this open sort of platform, and there are open platforms like that. So you could say Napster is like the open platform kind of model, and it's not necessarily monetized.
Apple.
Tell me about their business model, that what you think is innovative.
I mean, I think they sell, you know, just like a lifestyle, you know, like technically, like if you have an iPhone, it's very likely that you're probably gonna have at least one or even two more devices made by the same company, whether it's an iPad, whether it's an Apple computer. You know, like it's value. I mean, it's adorable, it's good and everything. And I like the brand recognition. You know, you see the sign and you know what it is. It doesn't have to say anything. But you see the sticker or the sign, and you know what it is. You know what it represents. I like that about it.
Strong brand, consumer technology, strong design focus, strong aesthetic sort of piece of it. That value creation. They're not necessarily innovating the newest products, but they're making the like cool aesthetic that gets people like lining up around the block, right? Very cool. Very cool. So Apple. What else we got? Actually, I'll say another one. Here's another model that you say. And the other thing you start seeing is that these models are everywhere, right? So like it's like the Matrix. You start seeing like these models are everywhere, and they keep getting used in different ways. So one of the insights about business models is that they're models, right? They're frameworks, they're ways of organizing things. So I'll give another one, Mary Kay / like whatever else you think of like that, right? Whether you call that direct selling, some of it is like the multi-level marketing. There's problematic aspects of that, but that type of model, right? That's an interesting delivery model. What else?
Avon is another one of those. I think
Avon's really like that. Yep. Avon, Tupperware. Now it's Rhode and Fields is like all your social media is like full of people promoting stuff that way, right?
The other thing that I see a lot of now is, and I see this a lot with cooperatives, and I'm sure this is with businesses that aren't co-ops, is the ability for people to be anywhere and be in it. So I see bookkeeping cooperatives where all of the work is done virtually, right? You email your stuff or you put it in a secure something online location. They do your books, they send it back. They can have people all over the country. It doesn't matter. They're still one company. They still have a company brand. And it allows them to hire or bring on people who really fit their model and their culture.
So that virtual distributed remote workforce model for the production, right? Greg, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was trying to think of a good company example for this, but I'm seeing a lot of people look at the subscription model. Like, you know, my wife gets like these like nutritional supplements in the mail. We were getting this like coffee alternative in the mail, but you know, the monthly subscription of like food or clothing, I wasn't, you know, there's like the clothing one. So I wasn't quite sure which company to use for that, but I think that's a really interesting one that's growing right now.
So subscription models in particular, cool.
Clothing, maybe Stitch Fix, right? Because they've had a lot of competition recently with people coming for them.
One thing that Maggie said, I was going to piggyback on that a little bit, is there's, I think it's pretty innovative and a little bit disruptive, and it's probably growing more than I even know. But TurboTax, if you think about why that was built, it was really to disrupt the whole accounting business. And it's done a decent job. And the interesting thing about it is Intuit's really expanded so they actually partner with accounting firms. And I really think of TurboTax as one of those fairly disruptive technologies or businesses.
And I would say that now, like, there's a lot of legal consulting firms that are going along with that same model.
Yep. Yeah, LegalZoom has effectively offered that same type of a model, right? So it's becoming a platform for service providers. And actually, if you become big enough, then folks who were competitors become potentially members, or, you know, however, whatever the relationship is. You start to actually become the platform, right? You become the network, and it has those network effects. Amazon has done that brilliantly as well, right? Like they destroy a market, and then they obviously there's some moral value judgments there too, but then they create the alternative, right? Like they then become the market, they become the platform.
I was also thinking about Zappos, the
Yep.
way they're basically a customer service organization.
Yep.
It just
I love
kind
it.
of chose shoes for some reason.
Yep. So the Zappos model is a retail e-commerce model, but very much focused on customer service, customer delight. Yeah, for sure.
And companies that really came up during COVID, like Instacart, that deliver groceries, stuff like that.
For sure. So delivery models for a variety of different things, for groceries, for all sorts of different things. And a platform that connects. So there's two things going on there, right? There's the delivery piece of it, and then there's the platform that, like, I think for Instacart at least, right? And for other ones too. There's then the, like, 1099, you know, folks who are working for them through the platform. It uses like the Uber type of a thing, right? It's like Uber Eats in that way. Cool. We've got a lot of great ideas of business models. I hope you have written down a bunch of these and some other ones as well. So now, and I think because we're the size we are and an engaged group, I'm going to suggest that we do this a little bit as a group, and then we'll break up into smaller groups and let you play it together. But who's got an idea for a market or an industry that they feel like needs to be improved, needs to be disrupted, you know, needs something new?
Amazon.
What about Amazon? Like, what about the market needs something new?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I think the problem with Amazon is that it is such a disruptor that it has destroyed so many other small businesses. It's like Barnes and Noble's moving in, offering discounts, causing small bookstores to close, and then raising their prices again. So I feel like Amazon overall is not a good model ultimately for the economy or for our society. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but I would like to see them massively revised.
I hear you. I do not disagree with that at all. I think when I'm thinking about industries that need to be improved and need innovation, I think about, like, where are there in particular customer frustrations? Where are there you know, businesses, industries? You know, the airline industry is, like, known. There are, like, jokes about the airline industry, how bad the customer experience is, right? Or healthcare, or higher education, right? Those are very broad sort of topics. But so this could be things that you think need to be improved, that need innovation, that need new approaches, or just something that interests you. So
I have a stupid one, but it's just something I have two. One is a hanger. Okay, I don't know. I don't know though. I mean, I don't know
for clothing.
For clothing, right?
Yeah, right on.
When has it been redesigned in so long? I don't know if that's applicable. But then the other one is also a little silly, perhaps even more silly. I'm almost embarrassed to even say it, but how about a toilet?
Yeah.
It's been so long since someone's really, I mean, I think the squatty potty was incredible. Like that's a real business right there.
Yeah.
And you know, I think it's interesting too, because I think if you ask people, you know, do they desire this item? I don't think they thought that they did, but then,
Right.
you know, if you use something like that, it's like, oh, that was, you know, that was great, whatever. So anyway, I do think just the toilets, just, it hasn't been innovated on or tinkered with. It's been tinkered on, but not with in so long.
Was that an intentional pun?
Yeah, it was. It was stupid again, but
No, well done. I didn't find any of that stupid. In fact, I found that all really interesting.
oh,
So
you
yeah,
said not to do that too. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
trust your crazy ideas for sure. Come up with the craziest stuff you can think of. I love it.
I think the recycling industry is due for a huge overhaul.
Tell me about that. What kinds of things are not working?
Well, in many communities, people recycle things that they think are recyclable and they're not. So it just creates more garbage that the recycling organization has to deal with.
Yep.
Recycling itself isn't consistent from one community to another, even from one town to another in the same state.
Yep.
So, you know, for the United States to have as much in theory that we, you know, community to community to recycle, we have a ridiculous amount of plastics in the ocean.
Yep.
So if you think about all the things associated with recycling, it doesn't seem to be working.
For sure. And Greg said, you know, feel free to drop your ideas in the chat as we go as well. So here's what I'm going to suggest. So from our discussions, I'm going to see how many people do we have? 16. Yeah, so we can break up into smaller groups. Can we? Breakout rooms. Okay, so we got 16. I'm going to create 4 breakout rooms. And I'm just going to have it assign automatically. So before I do that, think of your why, whatever that why is, you know, the why in the sense that the business, market, or other sort of area that you're thinking of that needs disruption, that you care about, that you're interested in, that you think could be done better, whatever that might be. So think about that, write that down, at least one, or settle on one that you think is the most interesting. So let's make sure you do that before we break out into these rooms. And then I'm going to put these rules in the chat, but basically what you're going to do is do a round robin with the 4 or so people in your group. Each person is going to say what their why is, what their industry, market, you know, other thing that they want to disrupt. And everybody else is going to suggest one of the X's, one of the business models that they think could disrupt that industry. Okay. Make sense? Any questions, confusions? Everybody ready to go? Because I'm going to send you out into breakout rooms and then we'll go and we'll play. Okay, here we go. I'm going to open all the rooms. And now you can go. All right. Is everybody back? I don't think we have everybody back. No one's sitting and waiting in a breakout room. All right, so we got some fun ideas. Anyone want to share some a fun idea that they came up with, or whatever idea you think is the best of your like X for Y? Oh, Maggie, you're muted.
I want someone else to go.
Okay.
But so my X, I want to be the blue apron of local regional food delivery.
Nice, love it. Who else has got one? The blue apron of local regional food delivery. Love it. I heard some interesting ones when I was eavesdropping. If I have to call you out, I'll call you out.
I think one thing that we talked about was being sort of the dating app for bringing in interesting curriculum in schools.
Okay. But you don't want to say Tinder in that context?
Well, I mean, it could be Tinder, but I know that there's so many more dating apps.
They're dating apps?
That was just the one that came to mind earlier.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the dating app for different curriculum.
Yeah, so sort of like, you're an elementary school teacher and you have to teach the science curriculum, but you don't really know about, plastics in the ocean or what, I don't know, some science topic that you're not really well versed in, but you could bring in a subject matter expert, but there would be a dating app that would help you like find.
Oh,
that.
cool. Yeah, like a matchmaking dating app. Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. What else you got? These are awesome.
I was talking about an app that would help with grocery shopping, like keeping track of all your past purchases and what stores they were at, and being able to like foods that you bought and create meals with different ingredients. And then also like if it could keep track of how often you're buying things. So say you're buying Q-tips once a month or shampoo every 3 weeks, it would add those to your grocery list at that amount of time.
Okay. Very cool. What else we got? There was one about yogurt. There was a deep dive into some yogurt.
We were working on a store model based on reusable glass packaging, concentrating on yogurt.
There were a variety of models that came up there. So one was it sounded like, Greg, you talked about like a beer growler refill sort of station situation.
There were two scenarios. One was refill your own yogurt, and then the bigger picture was what I think what you call, Josh, the uncontainer store, where everything you buy there doesn't have a container. So it's yogurt, it's orange juice, it's other bulk items, or either you bring a container or you reuse a container that's there that's been cleaned.
Are you talking about food co-ops by any chance?
I think it's very close to a food
It seems
co-op,
in the last 60 seconds, we've gone that way.
It's gone in a lot of different directions. There was a milkman for yogurt. There was, what else do we have? These are awesome. I hope you had fun. I know we dove way into this, so I'm gonna hand it over to Greg for really digging into the ownership model canvas now with the rest of the time that we've got. So I'll bring the slides back up, and we can dig right into the ownership model canvas. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, we'll talk a little less about the Y cooperatives and more about the ownership model canvas.
Yeah, actually, Josh, if you can just back up, I think 2 slides. One more. Boom. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so thanks everyone. So I work with cooperatives, Maggie does as well. And what are cooperatives? I think we got a great definition earlier. Some of you probably have no interest in cooperatives. Some of you might have some interest in cooperatives. Some of you are probably thinking, what is a cooperative? Just to recap that, a cooperative is a business that shares usually wealth and decision-making. And we meet a lot of entrepreneurs that are interested in that these days, especially with all the wealth inequity and racial inequity that's going on. I think there's more and more interest in how do I create a business that actually shares the wealth created by this company, that actually brings additional voices into the governance of the company, and also, frankly, just shares the load. So it's not all in one entrepreneur. We have this mythology of the sole entrepreneur, but people like working within community. So that's really what co-ops are. But one of the things we hear a lot is that this whole co-op thing looks complicated. So we've developed a little tool that may or may not be useful for you if you're not thinking about a co-op, but I think there's ways it can apply to almost every business that we've talked about, even if it's not cooperative. And basically the idea is to make it easier to think about these issues and to do it faster with less complexity and to bring some of the vagueness out of it. You can go to the next slide, Josh. So what we created is the ownership model canvas. This is actually our first workshop based on the tool. So would love your feedback later of how useful this was and how to make it easier. But the idea here is to give entrepreneurs some key questions to think about, kind of like the business model generation of who are the owners of our company, what are the benefits, what are the expectations. And one of the reasons I was really excited about this workshop is we think that every business needs a great business model, and it also needs a great ownership model. There needs to be some real thought, just as much as you're thinking about how we make money, you should be thinking about who's making decisions and who benefits from the wealth created from this company. So we'll show you the canvas itself. This is what we call the ownership model canvas. I'm going to put a link in the chat so we can play with it for a few minutes. But basically the idea is, first of all, who are the stakeholders you're serving? So in this model, we created an imaginary worker-owned bakery, but hopefully we'll get an example from the group in a minute. So let's just imagine everyone on the phone says, hey, we all love baking. Our thing is, Starbucks, but for bakeries, right? But we want it to be worker-owned. So the way the campus works is from top left to bottom right. And the very first question we ask is, who are the member owners? Sometimes there's non-owner stakeholders. So if we have a bakery, clearly the customers are also really important, but they may not be owners of the business. So we're trying to draw a distinction between the owners and the larger group of stakeholders. The next column would be, what are the benefits that the owners get? Usually we think of owners and it's just people who share in profits, but owners can also do things like be on the board, vote for who's on the board, you're on profit share. If it's a worker co-op, most workers in worker co-op would probably argue they have a better work environment because management is also accountable to the workers. And the next column would be, well, what would the expectations be to become a worker owner of this imaginary bakery? In this example canvas, you'd have to be a worker for at least a year, and maybe we have a $500 buy-in. And then we have some additional columns about, what sort of governance rights do they get? And then what sort of financial rights do they get? So if there was, $10,000 at the end of the year, is all that being divided equally? Or are we dividing it based on the number of hours worked? Or are we dividing it based on how long they've worked there? Or what is our sort of formula for how we would share out that profit? And most of the time it's proportional to what people put in. So that's the basic idea. There's some additional fields at the bottom that I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into right now, but I'm happy to talk to people offline about how we're using this tool. And again, the idea here is just give people like a simple spot to think about the ownership of the company they're trying to create. What I'd love to do is to take one of the companies that was suggested in the first part of the discussion and just pretend that that we're doing it as a cooperatively owned company. So who is the one who said blue ribbon, but for local food delivery? Maggie. Okay, Maggie Longo. Would you mind if we played around with that and just pretended that that was a cooperatively run company? Would that be all right?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a link in the chat, and we're just gonna all go there. Okay, so oop, that's the wrong link. Let's ignore that one. Did not work well. That did not work well.
Anyone want to join Greg's call? It's coming up.
I know, that's my Calendly link. You can ignore that. Oh, so close. Really not close at all, was it? All right.
You could be on the call if you need us to be.
Yeah, thank you. You could all be there to support. That'd be amazing. All right, so we're just gonna make a copy of this and do this a different way. Sorry. Let me do this one more time. So while I'm getting the link up, Maggie, since it's your group's idea, would you like it to be owned by the local restaurants, or would you like it to be owned by the workers of the?
Well, I think it needs to be owned by so it wouldn't so much be a brick and mortar as a service. So I think it needs to be owned by the makers, so the suppliers. And I think it needs to be also owned by the folks who actually put it all together. So workers and makers.
Workers and makers. Okay, so
when you say put it all together, you mean
So
assemble?
like no, it's like, well, yeah. So it would maybe folks who pack the orders, the office workers who put the orders together, right?
Okay.
yeah, so okay, so let's play around with that here. So okay. So it's the workers,
Mhm.
and then are they, so the restaurants are not necessarily the owners, is what you're saying. They're sort of the
Right,
non-owners,
so
right?
Right, so they would be the suppliers of the things we're gonna sell. So
Okay.
right? Restaurants and makers. So it might be someone who just makes kimchi or makes a scone we're gonna sell or something like that.
Great. Okay, so we're gonna put in local blue ribbon.
Blue apron, right?
Blue
Blue
apron.
apron, thank you. And the idea here again is that we're not trying to get it perfect. We're trying to get a basic version down so that we could go back to our community of stakeholders and say, does this feel right? Right? Like Maggie's saying, I think it's just the workers. Someone else might say, well, I think we should also bring the restaurants into the ownership class, right?
Right.
Like to have those debates, and it's not going to be perfect. And this is before we go to a lawyer, really get serious about these things.
Right.
Okay. And Maggie or anyone else, what do you think the benefits might be to the workers if they were part of this local Blue Apron?
To the workers. So,
To those member owners, yeah.
right, as member owners, well, control, right? Control over their environment. Control over the quality of the products and the services that they offer. The ability to make decisions that impact their daily life, whether it's, schedule or compensation.
Yeah. Great. Anyone else got any other ideas?
Pricing, I think it would give them control over what they charge their customers and how much came back to them.
Right.
Right.
So control of profit, right? Or control of revenue stream. Yeah.
Right.
And a share, some sort of profit sharing dividend. Is that what you're
Right.
saying? Yeah.
Love it. That's sounding better and better. All right. And would we have any expectations to become a member owner of this local Blue Apron cooperative? We would come up with a better name, but would we have any expectations, people? In other words, if someone started tomorrow, do they get to become a member owner, or is there some criteria either in terms of time or commitment or pricing for them to?
I think there has to be a time commitment, right? Because someone may be interested in the concept or the co-op, but they may not have the skill set yet. But so I think that, part of the expectation too could be for someone who wants to be a participant would be that the co-op would train you in these different sort of mainline, either operations, packing, finance, driving the truck kind of thing. So
Yeah,
I think, right,
that's another benefit.
that actually, yeah, to give someone a better background, stronger work experience.
Great. So how long should someone have to wait before they can become an owner?
Probably 6 months, because you may hate it.
Okay. Maggie Cohen, any other expectations you think for someone to become an owner?
Well, they have to have an interest in supporting local business and interest in what we're selling. So in food and makers. Yes, Maggie C, you're up.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I know we have two Maggies. I was jumping in. Maggie Cohen,
Yeah,
she works with a lot of other worker co-ops. Sorry.
I can't believe I've become somebody who would say this, but I would say they need to make a financial contribution to the company.
Yes, yes.
Okay. We're going to call that need to purchase a share of stock.
Skin in the game.
Yep.
All right, great. All right, and then sometimes people say, oh, you got to be voted in by other members, so that I think that'd be something we could talk about. Great, and since we're running short on time, I'm gonna jump to the next two columns just so you guys get a sense of how this works. What kind of decision-making power do you think an employee has? Like, and just for some context there are some worker companies where workers kind of have to get together on all decisions, and then there's other ones where it's a little more hierarchical, and the decision-making power people have as workers is really just who to vote for the board, or whether I run for the board, but there is more of a traditional hierarchy. So in our imaginary company, do we want this to be the workers actually get to make all the decisions, or is this really just sort of a representative democracy where they can also vote for the board? What do you guys think?
Well, if it was me, I think that you make decisions in your in whatever your responsibility path is on a day-to-day basis. So if you are the bookkeeper and you're handling AP and AR, then you make those decisions, and then you report back to whatever the leadership team is, the board or and that might change. So your managing member may change. Maybe that changes every 6 months or some sort of whatever the voted on cycle is. Yep. So it's kind of a traditional structure, but at the end, there's still input, right? And you report back to someone.
Yep. I love that. And you could certainly vote for the board as well, and you could run for the board in almost every co-op. So I'm going to add those in.
What kinds of things do you think of? What kinds of categories do you think of, Greg, for this? Like, there might be HR policies, there might be other types of kind of policies. It might not be, as much directly on the questions of, like, say, pricing or other things. You wouldn't do pricing by a vote per se, but board, who's going to be on a board if you're going to have a board? What other types of decisions do you see in the governance rights piece?
Yeah, so sometimes what people do is they'll come up with sort of a decision-making matrix, and they'll say, okay, at the board level, we're deciding these kinds of things. Maybe it's whether to take on new investment or new partnerships. At the management level, they get hiring power, and then at the individual level, they get sort of power on what they do. So I think there's different ways of slicing it up, and each one looks a little different.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's part of the goal of that questionnaire is just to have the company think through what are the kinds of decisions we would need to make. Right. And so for our local Blue Apron, it might be, which restaurants do we want to bring on? Who gets to decide that?
Right.
Who gets to set the pricing?
Right.
So we'll add those.
I also think sometimes who makes what decisions depends on how big the company is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
Like when a company is really small, it can set up a sort of false breakdown of responsibilities to make it too hierarchical.
Right.
And a lot of co-ops that I've worked with, when they're small, the group as a whole will make a lot of decisions. And then they start to break it down by department, and then they bring on a general manager. And, so as it grows,
Right.
the governance structure can evolve to sort of reflect what is most efficient and what continues to keep people engaged as the size shifts and the business itself just grows.
It's a great point. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the last column just because we're running a little bit short on time. And so if there was, $100 in profit at the end of the year, everyone gets their weekly or monthly salary, but if there's profits left at the end of the year because it's worker owned, those profits could be divided up amongst members and the board would decide that. But in our imaginary company, on what basis would they decide of how to divide up that $100? Would it all be equal, or would it be proportional to some calculation of time or tenure? Or what do you guys think? We're just putting something out on paper to float it back to the rest of the group.
I think it would be tied to contribution, meaning time, effort. So if you are I don't know if the co-op would have full-time co-op members and part-time, and there was a criteria set to that, but I haven't thought it through that far yet, guys. That's why we're doing this, right?
That's why we're doing it. Yeah, and so great. So just thanks for playing along, Maggie. This is great.
Sure.
You're perfect. I appreciate you being so up for this. First time we're trying it out. So just to walk you guys through the bottom two fields there, just so you have a sense of how we use them. So guidance is a great question for any business, right? Like who would be on part of your guidance, your board when you eventually have one? Who are your advisors, right? And so for this imaginary local Blue Apron, it might be mostly workers, but you might want to also have someone from the finance space. You might want to have someone from a local restaurant. So it's really just a spot to start to say, who should be at the table that's going to make us smarter? And then the last column on the far right is investment to get your new venture going. How much money would we need over the next year to go to a bank or to go to a local loan fund like CFNE? And then, and then where can we raise that? Is that coming from us? Is that coming from outside sources? And to start getting specific about how much it would take to get this thing off the ground. So that's really the idea of how we're using a canvas. And for me as a co-op developer in the space, it just gives me a spot to it's almost like you're trying to figure out what you got for dinner and you're like, let's just put everything out on the table and talk about what's here and to start to see, what all the things are that we have options to play with and then how they connect to each other. So I'm just gonna pause there, and I know we got 2 minutes left to see if there's any quick questions on how to use this or any feedback for the tool.
No, it's a great tool though. Particularly if you were brainstorming, right, as a group, if there was a core of you who were trying to get there, it's a really great tool, I think.
Like the having the example of the filled out one with the bakery is helpful. I think also I often think about this with the business model canvas, having some ways that you break down each of the sections, like you, Greg, and your team know what you're thinking about in each section, like what are the choices, right? And so if you have the mix and match, like these are some typical choices.
Right.
I love that as like a way of making this a little more not just I can think, oh, this is what I should be thinking about when I'm thinking about benefits, when I'm thinking about financial rights.
Yeah, I think you're right, George. I think we need to add some more examples to the blog post about this to say, here's an example from a worker co-op, from a consumer co-op, from a farmer co-op, so people get how it works. Mm-hmm. That's a great call.
One other thing that I've been told is that the business canvas, the more traditional one, that there's a way that it also looks at the value that you bring to your customers. I would emphasize that a little bit more so that people who do this are not just thinking about the benefits that accrue to the owners, but what value they're giving to their customers and how to do that as well as possible so that their business is successful.
Yeah, Maggie, I think you're right. We had the debate about should this be sort of an expanded version of the business model canvas, and where we landed right or wrong, because I think you could go either way, is that people should do the business model canvas to figure out that value proposition to the customers, and then separately, okay, let's also now figure out the benefit to our owners and have them as two discrete exercises.
It does strike me. I like that point, Maggie, though. I mean, I think, is there a way that you can think about how these things are aligned? Like, is there a way that your ownership structure can reinforce a greater value for your customers, right? You've got happier, the obvious one is you've got happier employees who are, worker owners who are wanting to provide better service. But I do like that thought of thinking, if this is customer driven, how do you
how do we connect it?
align it?
My concern is that people might do this once and they are less likely to do it twice. So if you can hit the major points in one tool and not say, okay, do this one first and now do this one also. I just find so many people are not able to make the time to do things that are not incredibly and completely pragmatic. And while there's an argument for why this is pragmatic, it's not going to necessarily seem like that at first blush.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Yeah, well, maybe that'll be version 2.0. That's really helpful. Well, I know we're out of time, so I'm going to stop my share so Josh can close up. I just want to thank everyone for playing along with it.
Yeah, I'm going to thank you, Greg, and thank everyone here. I think it was a great session and conversation. Thanks for playing along. It didn't necessarily go, maybe it went the way you expected or not the way you expected, but I think it was fun. And I think you've now got sort of two tools that in your arsenal that you can use, right? So you can use one that's for coming up with crazy business ideas, the local blue apron, I love it, and the ownership model canvas for really thinking through how can I think about the ownership structure and benefits, and I love that those two tools are really powerful to do as groups too. We think about entrepreneurship sometimes as a lone wolf, doing something or whatever. But one of the great things about the cooperative movement is that we're social beings. We're supposed to do things together. So that's my final thoughts for that. But thank you, Greg. Thank you all. Check out the rest of the Startup Week stuff, and we'll send some stuff and follow up in terms of the resources. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Josh and Greg. Awesome job. We appreciate it. And like Josh said, all the material will be sent out.
Cool. Yeah, thank you both. It's a neat tool. Thanks for
Awesome.
developing that, Greg.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see y'all.
Bye.
Bye.